are bright and shiny in my mind. You got me loving, hating, crazy indecision in my mind.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast, where the focus is on deer hunting, tips, tricks, tactics, and stories from across the Midwest. And now, here is your host, Aaron Blasey.
Welcome to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and this is episode number 20. And on today's episode, I have Jake Ehlinger on again. You know, back a month ago before I left for Dropped, I said I was going to do a part 1 and 2 with Jake just because I didn't get to all the questions I wanted to ask him. Well, within that month, I was on Dropped, and the deer season here in Michigan started, and Jake was going after his number 1 hit list buck called Pretty Boy. Well, Jake got a pretty cool encounter with him, and that's what I really want to dive into. We did hit on the remaining questions that I want to get to, which were awesome about the habitat and everything. But this story about Pretty Boy is a pretty cool one that everyone is going to enjoy. So I hope everybody enjoys it. And, you know, the last month being on Dropped, we had a good time. We were successful. The fishing was great. But I'm going to get into that in a later podcast so we can talk more about it. But today I'm going to get Jake Ehlinger on here. And I did, in fact, get to hunt for the first time in Michigan the other night. And I did see 2 does. Went into an observation stand on the main farm, which is where the 1 acre was. I didn't push into the 1 acre yet just because I just don't feel like it's the right conditions, and I just kind of wanted to ease into it and just kind of look from afar and see what was going on. So I did see a couple deer, and it was a good night, and it felt really good to get back into the stand. So enough of me blabbering. I'm going to get Jake on the phone here, and I hope everybody enjoys this. All right, here we are. I'm back from a long month in the bush on Dropped, and finally getting another podcast out to everybody. And you know, before I left, I said I'd have a 2-part with Jake Ehlinger, and finally got Jake back on here. But things have changed a little bit since I've been gone. And Jake, I'm sure we're going to get into it here soon, but how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Aaron. Better than most early Octobers, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, and you know, the reason why I wanted to have you on is because I had a whole list of questions from the last one that we didn't get to, but I think I'm going to throw those aside just for a little bit because, Jake, you killed I'm pretty sure it was your number 1 target buck the other night, didn't you?
Yes, I did. Yep,
and I'm, you know, when you text me and the picture came through, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he did it. He did it, and within the first week of season, and I was super pumped for you.
Well, thank you. I'll tell you, I was actually pleasantly surprised that all of us that have hunted big deer here in Michigan know that occasionally the stars line up, but I've never had a lot of success in early season. So it was pretty cool how it all came together. I'll say that. Yeah,
you know, in the last podcast we did, obviously, was a month ago, and you know, I think we touched on this deer you named Pretty Boy. Right, I think we did a little bit. We briefly kind of, you know, threw it out there. This is the deer you're going to be after. But I would like to backtrack a little bit for anybody that maybe didn't listen to that one, and kind of let's start from the first day that you even found out about Pretty Boy, and you know, really started making it your goal to really get after this deer.
Well, okay. You know, this deer started showing up real regular here on my property in front of game cameras, and I got several sightings of him during the 2017 season. And I actually, he was the buck that came in and postured. I have a decoy video that I shot last year and put on YouTube. And, you know, as good a deer as he was, I mean, really nice body, all kinds of potential, nice antler structure, probably, you know, low 100, okay, 105, 112, 115, who knows exactly, okay?
Okay, yep.
But anyways, I just knew that he had awesome potential, and you know how I am from our conversations that I have always looked. And at that time, I wasn't sure if he's just a really good, healthy 2.5, or maybe he was a 3.5. He was very dominant, and you know, he had every scrape I had a camera on. I got pictures of him. Okay, so he was working scrapes and really doing his thing. And considering Brutus was in the area, that let me know that he didn't have any problem challenging him. So he probably was 3.5 last year, but irregardless, had great pictures of him. And of course, gun season came and went, and like all gun season, Southern Michigan properties, all your good bucks just disappear, and you go, oh God, who killed him?
Exactly. Now, just to backtrack a little bit, were a lot of those pictures you were getting of him in the 2017 season, were a lot of those daylight, or were they majority after dark?
I definitely I got both, but I did get a lot of daylight pictures of him.
Did you think you knew where he was bedding? Was he staying on your property, or was he just kind of a passerby?
I had a really good idea where he was bedding because he consistently came out of one spot and worked a specific scrape. And that scrape, he was always working like that last 45 minutes of daylight. So I knew he was getting up, moving around, and yeah. So yeah, he had really cool potential and just an awesome deer. And it got into late muzzleloader season, or maybe even after muzzleloader, and sure enough, I started getting pictures of him again in my food source. And I was worried about him because he'd lost a lot of weight, and I could tell by one of the close-up pictures, he'd been in a fight. He had a pretty nasty antler gouge from the corner of his mouth all the way down to the base of his neck.
Oh, really?
The first few pictures, it was just wide open and gaping, and I thought, oh man, he's in trouble,
Yep.
Yeah. Because infection. But I kept getting pictures, and by the time we got through January, I was still getting the occasional pictures of him, and you could tell he was healing up. And I thought, oh man, he's coming around. So I got consistent pictures through the winter and into early spring, and I actually got a pretty good picture of him after he dropped both sides. And I had a camera in a spot where I'm known to find sheds, and so I went in there, and sure enough, I found his right-hand side.
Oh wow! Was it in a bedding area, or was it transition?
What it was how deer transition in the wintertime more to conifers.
Yeah. Yep.
So it was a slight southern exposure slope in amongst pine and spruce trees, with some autumn olive and mixture of other stuff in there. And deer always bed in there in the late winter. So I've always done well finding sheds in there. Some years I don't find anything, but anyways, I had a camera set up in there and was really getting good patterns. And, I could look and say, wow, he had his picture 2 days, or he had his antlers 2 days ago. Now here he is, and he doesn't have them, And so I got to looking around and I found it, and I was just really pleased. And I thought, boy, he's going to be a nice deer this year. And like all deer, especially when you have thick cover and good food sources and the kind of property that I have, they go off and I think they change their summer range somewhat, probably trying to get away from all the does and the fawns.
Right.
And I didn't get many pictures of him. I got some early when he was just starting to nub out and get like 3 or 4 inches of antler growth. And then I lost track of him. Never had any pictures. And then started getting pictures in mid-July on a food plot deep in the woods that I don't do a lot of work to just because it's tough to get my equipment into. But I'd gone in there in July and sprayed everything so I could plant it. And then, we got into the drought, and so I had a camera on it. Just so, deer still come through there. And there was an old mineral station that I had put minerals in from the fall before when it was legal. So there was still mineral in the ground, and deer were coming to that mineral spot too. So it was a good place to get inventory. And I started getting velvet pictures of him, and he was, I was pretty impressed. And man, that deer looked like he's about 18 inches wide, 10 point. And he had this distinctive little, he had a typical white spot or throat patch like they normally do. And then underneath there on his neck, the hair just got real light colored and kind of an oval. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so sure enough, I started viewing the pictures. I said, "Christ, that is pretty boy. He's gone into a 10 point,
So was he an 8 point the year before?
Yep, he was an 8 point. Yep, with a little, he had a little tiny small kicker at the antler base and a little bump on the bottom of the main beam that some people say, oh, he's growing a drop tine, but he didn't have that this year, and it could have just been from an injury when it was growing.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that. So anyways, I started getting fairly consistent pictures of him through all of July and early August, and then nothing. And, when it starts getting into mid-August, I start pulling cameras. So I pulled all my cameras from what I would call deep in the woods. And I've been experimenting, with licking branches. I try all kinds of things. We discussed that the last time. And I had a spot in this woods that I've always hunted before. And I thought, I'm going to take a chokecherry limb and I'm going to wire it to this ironwood tree, and it's right where these 3 trails converge. And I'm going to put my Browning camera on there and mount it real high and put it on video mode to take a 1-minute video, and put a 32 gig card and leave it in there. See what happens.
Okay.
And so I leave it 2 weeks. I go back in there and the card's full.
Oh my gosh.
Over the first thing the camera says, card full. Anyways, I start reviewing it, and you cannot believe how many does and fawns in early September, and some younger bucks that were hitting that licking branch, and it was crazy. And
was that within a staging area? Is that where you kind of figured it was, or was that like a destination spot?
It's actually just it's an area probably 30 to 40 yards from a major swamp crossing where the deer cross the water where 2 peninsulas connect.
Okay, yep.
25 yards of water separating those peninsulas. And then directly to the south, there's about 3/4 of an acre of a hinge cut, maybe 30 yards from that camera. So between bedding and transition, and then just full of oaks and lots of food. Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I really started getting tons and tons of pictures. And when I went back, say, I don't know, probably another week or 10 days, kind of worried that my card keeps filling up. And it was during that youth hunt time period, the 20th or something like that.
Yep.
And, I pulled the card and reviewed the videos. Man, I had all kinds of videos of Pretty Boy coming in there and really posing for the camera and working that scrape.
Really? So was he in a lot of daylight pictures, or was it pretty mixed?
No, almost all daylight. It's crazy.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And we had a heavy acorn drop, and so besides working the scrape, he was feeding, and the does, every doe and fawn, I don't care what their age class, even with spots, were working that scrape. Okay.
Wow.
Just amazing the data I got. So I was pretty impressed, and he had a buddy that he was hanging around with, which is about 100 and I'd say he's an 8-point. I know he's 3.5 years old. He's probably at least 127. He might go 130 of me.
Okay.
And those two were hanging together during the summer, and then here they are, always coming by within 20 yards of one another, working that scrape and feeding right there. So I was pretty impressed. I was like, man, he's right here. But to give you an idea from where all my major food plots, that's 400 to 600 yards away from where my major food plots. It's kind of a secluded bedding area. And I've just noticed over the years that in the summer, that's where a lot of the bucks go to bed. I think it's a spot they can get away from all the does.
Okay.
You know how they like to separate.
Yep.
And I talked about that last time. So, I just had the data, and I thought, man, I really checked him out, and I tried to estimate his score when and I would take some screenshots of the video, and I was pretty confident he was like a 145 10-point at least.
Okay.
Man,
so that's a big jump from the year before.
He put on 25 inches from last year.
Wow.
Which a lot of, you read a lot about that. Sometimes the biggest jump is either, between 2.5 and 3.5 or 3.5 and 4.5. And it's,
right.
By looking at his teeth, I'm still having a hard time saying for sure. So I'm going to send his incisors into a lab and get a definite on it. But, so, I've got that data, and I actually had a couple visuals of him every once in a while over here by the house in the last 2 weeks up along the edge of my bean field. I'd look out there in the evening, and that's a big deer. Just get the binoculars on him, and he's going into the thick stuff. And I think that's that Big Ten, And I had a camera in that area, and it was a cheap camera that's always blurry, those kinds.
Oh, yeah.
It's a spot where I normally don't get a lot of deer movement, and the reason the camera is there is I kind of use it like it just lets me know that the pattern is taking place. I can see that they're deer, and if they're close, you you can tell, but I knew he was coming through there occasionally. I said, okay, he's shifting and moving over to the food where the does are and in my really cool bedding areas. And, October 1st gets here, and, all my buddies are like, oh, man, you're all excited for October 1st? I said, no. I said, it's hot.
Right, exactly. So what was your plan going into it then? Like, did you have him pinpointed where you knew you wanted to hone in on it, or was it one of those things that was just like a crapshoot? I'm just going to try to go here, and it could happen. Like, what was your plan going into the season?
I'll tell you. I'll kind of backpedal a little bit on this. So about, I grow a lot of Roundup Ready soybeans. That's all part of my food production during the summer, and then that turns into, hardened soybeans with the pods for the fall and winter.
Yep.
This year we were fortunate. We had plenty of rain at the right time of the year, and I've got a secluded about a 1 3/4, 2 acre food plot back in my core, and I've got a licking branch tree, and it is nice, and I only hunt it under northwest wind, cold front type conditions. And always have good luck, always see lots of deer in there. It is so secluded, it just fills up with deer. So the beans were so tall this year, Aaron. They were somewhere between 45 and 50 inches.
Oh, wow.
Once you got, how the deer browse the edges, but you get 20, 25 yards into the field, and they were super tall. And I'd been running a camera there during August, and literally all you could see is the doe's head when she would come through the edge.
Holy cow. Yes, you had a good growing year for the soybeans then.
Yeah, so what happened was I've had some good luck early season seeing some really nice shooters in that food plot, and I use that food plot and my bank's blind more as an observation stand in early season if the conditions are right. Mm-hmm. So I devised a plan. I got to watching, looking at all my videos and camera data that I had. I said, these deer are absolutely avoiding the center of this bean field. They're just walking where it's, and you can't blame them. Okay. Like down in Iowa and Missouri, deer are used to soybeans being that tall, but we don't see that around here that much.
Right. Yep.
So I went in there with my walk behind brush hog about 3.5 weeks ago, and I mowed these paths that came from the north edge of that food plot in a windy, curvy pattern, and from the west edge, and they converged right up to this cedar tree that I have that is about 16 to 18 yards out in front of my bank's blind, that typically all the bucks end up at sometime if they enter that field. A lot of times they show up at dark, and usually that cedar tree is nothing but one giant scrape by November 1st all the way around it. Okay.
So you brush hogged your standing beans, but you made trails through it. Is that what you did?
Yep. And this is a narrow 24-inch wide brush hog. So I made two passes, going and coming, and they're probably about 32 to 36 inches wide. So I mowed these passes, going to it, went around it in a circle, had a path going right out, 20 yards out in front of my blind. Coming to a water source that I have. I've got a water tub in the ground next to an autumn olive bush, and the deer hit that water a lot. And then I divided that path, kind of widened it out so you can go kind of to the southeast or straight to the south, so the deer can move through there. And
just to backtrack a little bit. So when you went and brush hogged this, what time of year did you do it? Was it in September? Were you worried about spooking deer?
Yeah, I was a little worried that I was screwing things up, but they're pretty used to me out there being Farmer Jake,
Yep, okay.
So I went ahead and did that, and actually, as I was finishing up, it was getting really cloudy and rumbling some thunder, and I thought, oh man, it's going to rain. So I went back and grabbed a bushel of winter rye and wheat and 20 pounds of crimson clover, and I broadcasted all that up and down those paths.
Okay.
So, and then I walked away, and I've never been there since the night of October 4th. The conditions were really starting to look good. We had a major, about a 25-degree temperature drop. Winds were straight out of the north, and we had a high-pressure system moving in, settling right there at about 30.1, 30.12. And as I was watching the weather all morning and all noon, and about 1:30, 2 o'clock, I did my latest update. And I said, man, I'm going to take my shower. I'm going to get ready. I'm going to go hunt. I'm going to hunt in that blind.
So
And
this was at the front end of the cold front then, right?
Yeah, it was. This was the front end, which for an afternoon hunt is good on a food source. Okay.
Right, because they're probably laying low the couple days before because it's really hot, not eating much. So now they're going to get up and get to food. Correct?
And what I can tell you, what I do believe contributed to Pretty Boy is I really worked my tail off in my. I did such incredible work in my hinge cuttings this year. It's absolutely a sight to behold. I don't care who it is. If I bring someone in there and show it to them, they will have never seen anything like it. I can just say that. You cannot believe what they look like. And as I was working, and even though I was busy working on them all summer long, no matter when I went in there, if I did an improvement, I'd go back in there 2 weeks later and there'd be deer poop and deer hair and they were all over it. Okay?
That's awesome.
That's so cool. I knew I had the zone picked. And so it's the evening of or afternoon of October 4th. The conditions look good. So I go through all my process. And I'm going in, and I've got really good access. And my hybrid sorghum, in some of my open areas, my sorghum is like 12, 15 feet tall, and I'm just like, I'm pretty stealthy, okay. And I'm going in, and I'm dressed light because it is still warmer than I'd like it to be, but the temperatures are falling. I think it was in the 40s by then. And I'm slowly making my way there, and I go down. I've got a tractor path wide enough to take a tractor, an ATV, and that sort of thing down through the center of this core area. And about 10 yards from where I turn to go left up this trail that I've made to sneak into the blind, it gets me within about 40 yards of this tiny little food plot I call the hourglass plot. And I'm standing there looking, and I can see something moving, and sure enough, I see a deer in that food plot. And I go, oh, man. I'm not going to be able to go up this path without spooking that deer. So I stand there for a while, and the winds, this deer is east and north of me. So with a north wind, I know it's not going to smell.
Right.
And so I back up real slow, and I kind of make a fish hook through these standing pine trees. And anyways, I make it up to my bank's blind. And just as I'm kind of walking up, and I've got tree limbs and hinge cuts and vines growing all around the base. And this blind is about 14 feet up. And I start looking through the holes as I'm going up the ladder, and I can see heads and backs of deer right out in front of the blind. I'm like, oh my God, there's deer in the food plot. So the truth is, I get in, and I successfully get in, get the door shut, get sitting down, and I get to looking, and there's a total of 8 different deer and 1 buck out there, and they never knew I was there.
That's awesome.
So that's a pretty exciting start from about 4:30 in the afternoon,
Yeah, and with those Banks blinds, because we hunt on those Banks blinds as well, and they are sealed tight. They are comfortable sitting, and they're really nice blinds.
They are, and you know how those windows have seals on them. So the first thing, my normal routine is when there aren't deer out in front of me, is I need to open those windows and break that seal loose. And then just kind of close that window without the locks on it, so that if I do need to open the window to get a shot, I can. Well, I got these deer right out in front of me, and I can't open the window, And I look up, and man, I see a pretty nice buck out there now. I'm like, oh, geez, there's another buck, And I got a doe and a pair of fawns coming right down one of those mowed paths. Okay, I'm going, man, the plan is working.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And long story short, deer moved out of the way, got behind brush and trees, and some of the does moved off, and I was able to get my windows open and shoot some video of and zoom in on the paths. And gosh, when you zoom in, with the camera, I could just see all this green growth. I mean, these paths are just bright green. Okay, mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, and I could see fresh scrapes around the cedar tree. So. Eventually, all the deer moved off, and it was kind of dead from about 6 p.m. to about 6:30, 20 minutes to 6. And I start seeing here's a couple of does, here's a couple of fawns, and then I catch a 2.5-year-old that I've got on camera there a lot. He doesn't have any brow tines, but he's nice. He's got really, really potential. He's kind of heavy and bladed, and so I see him out there, And then not 10 minutes later, I see this 1.5-year-old buck out there, and that 1.5 year keeps looking to the east where I can't see because imagine this food plot kind of being in a L shape, and I can't see the L to the north. Okay.
Okay. Yep.
So this buck keeps looking, and he keeps looking. He eats, and he keeps looking, and all along the north side of that plot is really seeded real heavy with brassicas and turnips, and because the deer browse the beans real hard on that north side, and so eventually I see some big antlers moving through the beans, and I get my binoculars out. And I go, holy smokes, it's pretty boy.
Holy cow! And this was at what time you said?
This was about 20 minutes to 7. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So I got I got a camera and a tripod, and it's a stump too, so there's not a lot of room, but it's good for me, for one guy. And I have hunted it with 2 people. It's a little crowded, so I've got my tripod and I'm getting some video and zooming in on him, and the more I'm watching him through the video lens and then getting my binoculars, I'm like, oh man, he's a nice deer. Oh gosh, he's a nice deer. And he was so much taller. He was a good 8 to 10 inches taller than the other 2 bucks. Okay.
So he definitely stood out to you.
Yeah, he stood out. So, he keeps working and he keeps working, and he's basically feeding, heading west right along the north side, the first 10 yards of that food plot, right where all those brassicas. He's inhaling the brassicas, and then he kind of steps into where the beans are 3 feet tall, and he grabs a few beans, and he's just taking his time. He's in no hurry. And I have this on video, and actually I put a YouTube video up yesterday with my story, so I'll send you a link to it.
Yeah, that'd be great.
But he gets to that first path that I mowed, okay, and it's all green, and he's got his head down. He just starts walking right down that path, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to walk right up to this tree. But like all big deer, the wind was from the north, so he's on the north side of that plot, and he gets about 5 or 6 steps in, and he kind of stands, and he puts his head up, and he looks around, and you can actually in the video see him take steps backward and go back, go, no, I'm not, he would have had to been tailwinding to continue south, okay?
Yeah.
So he continued west along that edge, and his little buddy that was hanging out with him, this little 1.5 years, was ahead of him about 20 to 40 yards. And so I'm busy getting video and watching that buck, and I've ranged him. He's 57 yards away. That's just too far to shoot, at least for me. And all of a sudden, I see his little buddy walking right up the trail, coming from I've got a west trail too that I mowed through the beans, right up to the cedar tree. Next thing I know, that little buck is working scrapes, and and I'm looking through the video, and then I look up, and 20 yards away, here comes Pretty Boy coming right up there.
Oh man.
I'm like, man, game on. So because of my camera and being on a tripod and afraid that it would be in my way using my crossbow and everything, I turned it off, pushed it off to the side, and now I've got these 2 bucks at 15, 16 yards working the scrape, and my window's still closed because it's like, how do I do this? They're right here.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm really watching both of them intently, and they both got their heads up in that thick cedar, and they can't see me, and I just open that window right up. And you know how you lift it up to the top, and the hinges are, it'll hold the window still,
Exactly. Yep. Yeah.
And then I grab and I got a new Matthews Mission Sub 1 crossbow this year.
Okay.
So it's my first time using it, and I've shot it, and it's just incredible, So with that stump, it's got sort of the higher window, so it's more of a gun or a crossbow blind anyway. So anyways, he's working that scrape, and he is broadside, and I put those crosshairs right behind his elbow and touch it off, and I just watch that bolt disappear, and I hear that thump.
Oh,
and
man.
he just tears off. He just tears off running, right back
Yep.
to where he was. And then I'm watching him cut through the beans, and now he's not following the trail. He's going right through the beans. And he gets right to the edge of where the beans and the brassicas are thick, that last 10 yards. And he turns around and stops and looks back in the direction of where it all happened, and then just hits the ground.
Oh man, he died right. Didn't even get off the food plot, huh?
Didn't even get off the food plot.
Oh my gosh.
I would say his total distance is maybe 40 yards.
Holy cow, that's awesome.
So it was double long. It turned out I went right through the heart. So now, I'm like, my God, look what I just did. I'm thinking, holy smokes, he's laying there. I can see him laying there.
Wow.
So this was this probably happened right at about 7:05. Okay, so I had to watch that deer for about 20 to 25 minutes, which
Yep.
is pure torment. You've been.
Oh man, you had the perfect scenario though. North wind, and how bad was the wind blowing? Was it like 9 to 12? Was it just, a little wind?
I would say it was in that 8 to 12. Sometimes it would be, you could see leaves moving, and sometimes the pine trees. I'm tucked into a pine. Sometimes that pine limb would be a move. You know how it's gusty but it was good, and this is kind of in a secluded area with a lot of trees around it. So
right.
Shit was,
Yep.
So, I gathered my stuff up and I grabbed my camera and I did a really cool recovery video, just basically telling my story in front of the camera, and then literally using the camera and walking up to where he was standing, finding the bloody bolt, and then walking, down one of those mowed paths right up to the deer,
That's awesome. And just as much as you thought, mowing those paths, it was going to hurt you, which it could have, and it may have, but obviously it didn't, because it actually ended up helping you. And, one of my good friends did that last year and killed, 2 really big deer in one night. I had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and he did that as well. He didn't mow it, but he went in and with a roller behind his Ranger and rolled a path it was really tall, like kind of cattails, but grass. It was about as tall as, we are, but he went there and rolled it right by a stand, and those deer use that religiously,
They do. And and I've used this exact technique in the woods, in thick cover, in hinge cutting, creating, people refer to them as corridors or steering tunnels or whatever you want to call them. And I've had great luck in the cover. So that was my thought process back in early September. But man, these beans are so tall that if I'm going to have a chance, I'm going to have to do something, Right. And I'm really glad I went ahead and did it. Okay.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm so happy for you. And, like you said, you hadn't had a lot of success in early October, and you just found the right potion, I guess, for that night, the front end of a cold front, and you knew they'd probably be wanting to feed because they hadn't been feeding the last couple of days. And
right. It had been, pretty warm and humid. And,
yeah.
And I didn't know what to expect because we do have a very heavy acorn crop, and I know a lot of deer love to sit in the cover. And, but there's a deer that knew that area well, felt comfortable in there, and he decided to come get some greens,
That's awesome. So I guess what is your plan for the rest of the year? I mean, what does the rest of the year hold for Jake?
Well, I'm probably going to try, and as soon as we get some cool weather again, I've got a couple of very low impact stands I can get into to try and kill a couple of big does, because I really need to. I've got some high numbers. I should kill more, but I at least get a couple. And then what I'm probably going to do is wait till that Halloween first week in November and just save I built a setup this year. I cannot wait to get in there. I've got a couple of nice deer. I've got one big 8-point. He's real tall. He's not real wide, but he's very heavy. I know for sure he's at least 4.5 this year. Could be older. And it's going to take a heck of a deer for me to kill. Okay.
Yeah.
This deer, by the way, I went through and, I score for commemorative bucks and all that. And so I've got it, I got his antlers cut from the taxidermist and really went through and marked it all up, put the tape on it, marked the base point, did a super good job measuring him. And I've got my score sheet right in front of me. He grosses 144 and an 8.
Holy cow. You're really close. You were right there.
Yeah. And then that's 142 and some change.
Is that your biggest Michigan deer?
That's my biggest Michigan archery kill. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So very happy with it,
That's great.
But there's a part of me, Aaron, that is like, gosh, if I'd have been blessed enough to have different kinds of neighbors or owned a larger property, I would have loved to let him go another year.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think we're all in that boat.
I'm sure he'd have gone into the mid 60s or maybe even hit Boone.
Yeah.
The deer just has all the potential in the world,
Well,
But-
and to make a jump from 25 inches or so in 1 year, that's a good jump.
Yeah, it is. That's a good jump. So he did real good. He didn't have of course, it's early season, so he wasn't all bulked up like Brutus was and that sort of thing. But still a real nice deer, about 190 pounds. So, I got no
That's
complaints.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I had some updates for you,
Okay.
and I kind of briefly talked to you yesterday, and I've been gone for the last month up in northern Saskatchewan on a moose hunt, and finally got home, and last night we had a tail end of a cold front come through, and it's been raining off and on, and I said I'm gonna go sit at the main farm at the 1 acre farm, but I just the wind was perfect, and I've got a couple stands in the 1 acre where we did all the hinge cutting and everything, but I'm like, I don't want to push in just yet. The pressure
Yeah.
was high, but it was starting to drop. The
Yep.
weather, I mean, the temperature was like low 50s. But I had, which I have a stand that's on the edge of the bean field, and we still have standing beans, and we had wheat flowing in over it. So there's wheat growing in the field as well, and
Oh, nice.
so I'm like, I'm just gonna go, and I can see a country mile out of that stand, so I don't want to push into the 1 acre. And then I called you and kind of tried to reassure my idea, and you said yes, definitely these deer are gonna want to feed, and so that's what I did. I got into the stand, sat for about 4.5 hours, and not really knowing what I was gonna see. I've never sat that part of the farm. I just wanted to kind of more of an observation stand,
Yeah.
and just kind of see where the deer were moving. I was around the corner, so I couldn't really see the 1 acre. I couldn't see if anything was coming in or out, but I could see, I've been watching, 4 or 5 bucks, 4 for sure shooters, possibly a fifth all summer. And they were betting on the neighbors, and I could see that betting area. So I was really watching that pretty heavily. Never saw anything come out of there, but I did have 2 does work across the field right to me. So that was exciting to see that, and kind of see, I'm still trying to learn the farm. So just to see, any deer movement's good movement for me. And, that farm being 80 acres and only 1 acre of timber, it's a farm where, yeah, some nights I think you're going to probably see 10, 15 deer, but you might go 8 or 9 sits without seeing a deer, but then you're going to see the deer. That's
Yeah.
the way I look at it. And I just got to be really patient with it. But, my number 2 buck on the hit list this year, he actually got shot. I think it was Wednesday or Thursday. He got shot by the neighbors to the east of me, so he's gone. But as far as I know, number 1's still out there, and the rest of them are, as far as I know. So yeah, that's kind of the update I have right now. And I talked to you as well about when is the best time to go in there and hunt that 1 acre. Well, I was thinking about it today, and I really want to go in there on the front end of a cold front, and I kind of want it to be later October, like around the 25th. I want to push in there because that's where my does are going to be bedding, and I feel like right at that time, that's when the bucks are the more mature bucks in the area are going to really come and look for those does. Do you kind of agree with that?
Oh, I do. And, I would say that time frame of October 25th, man, I've seen some real bruisers moving casually enough to where you can actually get an arrow into them.
Right. Yeah.
They're not, they're not all panicked and running and chasing and, all that that's involved. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
think
my
a good
plan.
move.
Anyway, I just wanted to be safe with it, and then I called you yesterday for reinsurance because you've been on the farm, and I wanted to get your take on it as well. And
I mean, it's definitely one of those spots where you could go in the first week of October and maybe kill a giant. But if you didn't, and say that last 10 yards, you hear a big deer get up, boy, you've really eliminated your opportunity down the road, just because it's such a small condensed area. So I think you're playing it right, and that's how I'd play it. I just wouldn't go in there and push it too hard.
Yeah.
Most people know you really don't hunt a bedding area at this time of the year, unless it's sort of a run and gun. Like, I don't care if I blow this area out, I got another farm I can hunt, kind of
Right.
thing.
Yep.
So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so we'll see. I'm gonna let it sit for a little while, but if we get a pop-up cold front here within the next 2 weeks or something, and it's like if all signs point to yes, then it might be one of those things that I move in, but I'm gonna wait for that time and just be patient with it,
Yeah, yeah, and that's the hardest part for all of us that are doing habitat work, because you've made some major changes in there. You've got a lot more deer in there last time we talked than what you normally see, and so you're just like grinding your teeth waiting for that day, right?
I am, because 2 months ago was the last time I was in there. I was in there August 5th was the last day, and that was the day that I went in there and I broadcasted the clover. And I put a camera in there as well, and that camera has been marinating in there. So not only I want to check the camera really bad, but I also want to see how the clover's doing. So it's like, nope, you just gotta relax, just take a step back and go in there at the right time, and that might be the time where you kill them.
When you're following that blood trail right down that path with all that gorgeous clover, that clover really looks good.
I hope so. I surely do.
Yeah, it's going to be. I think you'll have, before the season's over, I think you'll have some pretty good stories about hunting there. So.
Yeah. Well, to switch gears a little bit, there's something I really want to talk to you about, and it's about your plan with your screening this year. You had a really good plan set, and you want to try it out, and I'd like you to kind of break down for everybody what you designed and how you did it and how it looks now and how effective it is, basically.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have, I took over an existing farm with woodlots and their typical shade. And, it wasn't the most perfect setup when you look at where I built the house based on typical wind conditions. The farm is on the north side of the road, and it's a long rectangle. So the front 20 acres was tillable when I first bought it, and then there's woods and swamp and high ground and low ground, and it's not a perfectly straight edge. But anyways, when I started getting into planting food plots, 20, 30 some years ago, I started planting these food plots right up next to the edge of the woods, and then having the farmer that was still renting it, use the front, 18 acres and to do his thing, So I ended up establishing food plots, and I have left some warm season grasses, and I grow a lot of soybeans. I'm guessing this year somewhere around 6 acres, and they're just, they grow well. They put nitrogen back into the soil. There's a lot of good things about them. Good food all summer long. But the problem is I have a tractor path that cuts right down through the middle of a soybean field, and it's a long, narrow field that kind of winds along the edge of the woods in my bedding areas. And I've tried so many different things, and like it or not, you're going to have a gap here and there, Right. And this year I planted a really good variety of a hybrid sorghum that I got from Northwoods Whitetail, and planted it. I was very architectural with it, and planted it thick, as in probably 10 yards wide along the edge of these bean fields and on both sides of my tractor path, and literally. Between the beans getting tall and then the sorghum getting 15 feet tall, I can get to and from my areas with deer in these fields and never ever know I'm there.
That's awesome.
That's what
you wanted, right?
Oh, it is. It's exactly what I wanted, and I think that played into helping me with Thursday night's success. And even that field, there was one little gap on that field where I killed Pretty Boy. Where deer would look and see deer coming across this tractor lane, and I planted about a 40-yard long, 10-foot wide strip of sorghum, and it really sealed the deal, And so my screening, I'm a big believer in screening. The easiest deers to kill is one that doesn't know you're there, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And and that if you're screening them from food, if you're screening them from potential bedding areas or transition zones, wherever places deer may be, if they cannot see you, and then when you cross through these quote danger zones where you used to be able to be seen, and the wind is right and your scent control's right, you can get in and out of those areas, and that degrades your property. For a lot of people, property starts out good, but by the 10th of October they've had 5 hunts and they busted a few deer and they got seen, and so now things are changing on them. And haven't had that problem over the years because, in addition to the sorghum, I also hinge cut trees along edges of some of my bedding areas to just grow a jungle of thick density so that deer 50 yards in the woods can't see where I'm walking as well.
Right.
Yeah, and it works, just really, really good for me. And, everything's about food to bed,
Exactly, yeah.
It really is, and you get to travel all over the country and the world, and I don't care what you're hunting, it still boils down to that, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, we were just on a moose hunt, and we were in the thickest, most gnarliest stuff on a moose hunt, and you would think these moose are going to have a tough time getting through, which they do, with their big antlers and everything, but you don't go out and hunt, I mean, if you do find like a little open area within, a marsh or or some type of area that just looks good. I mean, that can work, but you want to get into the thick stuff. That's even with moose, so anything like that, they like to cover and the security. One question for you, I guess, with the screening and the sorghum and everything, when is the best time to plant it, and what is the best way to plant it?
Well, as far as when, I'd say you have, number one, it's an annual, it's in the grass family, so it can't take frost. And the ground temperatures need to be warm in order for it to germinate and do well. So you're really looking at early June all the way through about the 4th or 10th of July. You still get away with it. So you've got a lot of opportunity. And it starts slow and it kind of picks up speed as it gets older, and it loves nitrogen. So you've got to feed it nitrogen and be good with your weed control because it is a grass, then you would have to spray like a broadleaf killer to get rid of anything else competing, but you can't get rid of competing grasses. Say warm and cool season grasses are coming in and overtaking, then you're kind of screwed,
Okay.
But my own method is I broadcast, and it's so hard to do because, like it or not, you're going to get it too thick, and I really try to make it thin, where I want it to hit the ground with about one seed, every 4 to 6, 7, 8 inches. A lot of areas I had great luck; it was exactly that way. Other areas it didn't, because of the way the broadcast works. Okay. And probably the best way is with a drill. If a guy had like a bean planter or something like that, or say what he planted, if he could have them on like 10-inch centers, it'd probably be ideal,
Okay, I see.
Yeah, it really would, because you could just lay it right down, know exactly where the seed is, and it would do, real, real good for you. And like I say, you've got so much time. I've actually got a neighbor here in our co-op, and a couple of years ago, he got a late start, and he said, "Man, is it too late to plant?" I said, "No, let's try it." And it was July 10th, and that screen still got 8 feet tall for him.
Wow. Okay.
So, yeah.
That's something I've always wanted to try, and it always creeps up on you, and you're like, "Oh, I got to get that in the ground." Then you're always busy, and and I've never been able to do it. And that's why this year with the hinge cutting, we kind of did that with the hinge cutting. But I really want to try the sorghum. I've got a food plot on my family farm that sits in the middle of a long. It's like I want to say it's like 500 yards long, but it's only 40 yards wide, and it's all set aside grass. But on each side of it, it's got 2 really nice pine tree stands on each side of it. And the deer on the one side, it's really thick, and the deer bed all in there. On the other side, it's kind of open. The pine trees have kind of overtaken themselves. It's open on the bottom, but they like to run back and forth. Well, to get into that stand, if there's anything in the food plot, you have to walk from the north down the edge of the pines to get into the stand, so everything can see you. So I've been wanting, but it's really sandy soil as well. So
Well, I think
it's
if you
kind of hard to grow anything really.
yeah, if you took a soil test and amended your soils, and it might take you a few years. You might want to just grow some oats and buckwheat in a strip, and and some crimson clover, and use it as green manure, which means as soon as it gets up 3-4 inches, disc it back in and start building some organic matter that will hold moisture. And but if you take the soil test and you see where it's at and what you need, and Mother Nature treats you well, and you get consistent rains like we had this year, oh man, it'll grow. I mean, it's amazing how it changes from the middle of July to the middle of August. I mean, it'll grow 6 feet in that amount of time.
That's crazy, and that's what I want to get into. You get a lot of guys that do plant it, and it only gets about 3 or 4 feet high. And so I would
there's a feeding process. When it gets to a certain height, you want to really hit it heavy again with nitrogen when it's in that 14 to 24 inch zone. You want to really hit it with urea. I mean, that's what I use, 4600, and put it down heavy. And this year I did it right in a pounding rainstorm.
Okay. Yep.
Which is the best time, because now it's melting it, it's absorbing, it's going into the ground. And you can also do it, say, we get in lots of times in mid to late July, we'll have a pretty heavy dew, So if there's an expected heavy dew, and the dew point's going to be right, and you can go out and spread that seed, and then you have a good heavy dew, then instead of it just evaporating, because that's the trouble when you top dress nitrogen like that, it tends to evaporate and just dissipate on you.
I see.
Okay. Yeah. So,
cool.
So yeah, if things work out good and timing and Mother Nature, you can have a great screen.
Yeah, and I've seen pictures of yours, which I will be definitely putting on, my social media and everything, so people can see them. And the screening is pretty crazy how big yours got. So.
Oh yeah, it's very nice. So
I've got a couple other questions here that I wanted to get to the first time. If you don't mind, I got about 3 more if we want to go through those.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
So what are some of the top 5 improvements that you highly recommend for people to do on their property?
Well, as far as top 5 improvements,
I know it's kind of a vague question, I guess. It depends on the scenario you have, but I guess if, within just any property in general, what are 5 things or 3 to 5 things that someone can do that will really benefit them?
And that would be, number one, I would say that the number one improvement to do, because it sets everything up, is your bedding. Okay. Find that location where deer are currently bedding. If they're not, create a secluded area where you can establish bedding, and that can be done, so many different ways. If you've got existing trees and forests, you can hinge cut, select cut, so many different methods. You can grow warm season grasses. You can let early successional growth come up. There's a lot of different ways. It's very important to know where your deer are bedding. Okay, and I don't care if that's 10 acres that you own, or if it's 110 acres. And then, of course, food. And ideally, if you can, depending on where you're accessing that property from, sometimes you don't have a choice. You've got one road frontage. Sometimes people are living there, so here's where their house is, and so I walk out the backyard, and this is where my tractor lane is. They got established route. So if you can select that route and think about that route, and so many people I run into, from my consulting business, the first thought out of their mind is, well, the predominant wind here is X. Okay, and it's like, well, let's not worry about the predominant wind. Let's talk about when the deer that you're trying to target, when are they going to move? And that is mainly pretty typically surrounds around a cold front.
Yep.
So let's think about north wind, northwest, northeast wind. So many people set their properties up for southwest winds, and then of course when the cold fronts come in, all their stands are wrong.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the best time to be
And
hunting them.
I can tell you that in fair weather, mild weather, sure you can kill nice big bucks. Everybody, it's done all over, but here in Michigan, you and I know on the last podcast we talked at length how difficult these Michigan deer are, and they are a nervous creature. So they've got to be comfortable in order for things to work out right. So I would just say, keep in mind, where can you put a bedding area or multiple bedding areas? Where can you put food that you can create that will work to your advantage under seeking rut periods and also just during the food to bed and bed to food routine. And then how are you going to access? How are you going to get in and get out? Plan it, think about it. I've got a couple of fellas I know here in like Jackson County, just north of me, that just bought some properties, and they've been, they watch a lot of these Facebook sites and they go to these forums, and I give these younger guys a lot of credit because they buy these pretty wide open farms, and they let the early succession come up, which is just weeds and grasses and autumn olive and that thing, and they start planting the sorghum strips, and they're compartmentalizing that property, and they're planting food plots, and they've got a strategy, and they're doing very well. Okay, and so they're taking a typical farm that if you just treated it normal, they'd have very mundane, if no success. And I'm just so thrilled to see how many people are embracing it.
Right. Yeah. Well, cool. So there's a good top three, and that's kind of where I figured you might be going with it, but I didn't know if you had, a potion in a bottle, which everybody wants to know. Oh, you do this regimen and you do these, and then you're going to kill big deer. Well, it's not like that, but if you had any other curveballs out there.
Just from strictly from a habitat. If we get into hunting and when to hunt and pressure, how not to overpressure, ascent control. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. But to start with, the deer have to be there and they have to be actively using their property. Yeah. So out of those three, I would add number 4, and that is don't overpressure your property. Okay.
Right.
You got nothing to worry about during the summer when the deer are in their summer patterns. I mean, I work on my farm. I do a lot of stuff. You see the pictures, and stuff that I do. And, if you back out by late August or early September when those bucks are making that transition from velvet into hard antler, hey, proof's in the pudding. I've done it consistently for a number of years.
Definitely. Yeah. So the next one I got for you is, in what location or geography of a property are the best to do a hinge cut? Like maybe furthest away from all the people, center of the property, on a hill, or in a low spot? Like,
yeah, that's a really tough one because, every property's got its topography, or maybe it's laid out and you walk down this ridge and you come to this swamp and it just looks awesome. And then right on the other side of that swamp is a subdivision. You go, oh, okay, that's
right.
that's not going to work, but given all things equal, I like to have my hinge cutting bedding definitely in some core areas. And I also like to have them along edges of the property, especially spots where I have potential trespassers. And, a lot of people might scratch their heads, but it's worked real good for me where I've had access issues. And I just hinged that entire fence row 50 to 60 yards wide along that fence row. And I've just turned it into such a mess that the people that used to walk in there and, look into an open woods, now they can't look into an open woods.
Right. That is nice.
And then if there are deer bedding and utilizing that thick mess that I've made in there, with, of course, distinctive deer trails and open areas for bedding, as those people that say hunt your field edges or your woods edge or whatever it is, as they approach those deer that are already there are very aware that those people are there, and they certainly don't go running towards them.
Right.
They will either just sit tight and wait them out, or just kind of get up and just slowly move deeper into your property. But I am a firm believer that, because of the weather conditions, we talked about high pressure, low pressure, cold front, mild. I like to have on all properties high elevation bedding and low elevation bedding. Some large in size, some small in size. And that's the deal with the doe groups versus isolated bucks and different times of the year. So, it's not a one-size-fits-all, if I can answer that question correctly for you.
Is the reasoning for the high and low bedding, is that more for like wind thermals and times a day that you can hunt each plot?
Yeah, and it's about deer being comfortable irregardless of what Mother Nature puts out.
Okay, I see. So you're just giving them a big variety of,
Yep.
Some deer might only like to stay low, so you want to give them low areas, or
Yep.
vice versa for, higher areas. I see what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know. Hopefully this year I can get you and Cole out here, and you can see that I've got it right down next to the water. Great bedding. I've got it up on the hill, 30 feet high, and it's amazing how those deer, depending on conditions, bed high,
Yeah.
bed halfway in between.
Yeah.
And my goal is always to try and when you use that term hold deer, that's a loose statement because deer have a home range, okay.
Right. Yep.
But you can have them spend 80% of their time on 20% of their home range during daylight, and then that means ideally that's your property. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and to answer your question, Cole and I are definitely coming. We just got to figure out the right time to come. But maybe it's the winter, right after season or something, and get in there and really get to see. I think everything will start clicking for me a little more. I've got a small dosage of, seeing it hands on what you helped do and everything on the main farm, and I want to see kind of a bigger scale of it. So I can't wait to do that.
Hopefully we can do that maybe like right after first week in January or something like that.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
Get you right in, and you can just see all these beds and trails, and it'll be cool. So
last but not least, certainly, and this question I've been kind of thinking about, and I've had a lot of people kind of ask me too as well when they get a new piece of property, or if they have an existing piece of property, where to start. But this question, if you had to start with an 80-acre piece of solid deciduous trees or 80 acres of solid, conifers, or where everything else is equal, which would you pick and why?
So you're saying 80 acres of oaks, maples, basswoods versus 80 acres of conifers?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, I would definitely take the 80 acres of deciduous oaks and maples, primarily because of the diversity in trees that produce mast and great browse. Okay. Deciduous or conifers, as great winter thermal as they are, and deer love to bed in them. If I had 80 acres of it, it would be the most random, unpredictable hunting environment I think a guy could own.
I could see that. Yep.
I mean, there'd be deer in there. You just never know where. Okay. Now,
right. Yeah.
You can also go into that let's say you do have 80 acres of mainly pines and spruce and some fir trees. And if you go in there and strategically cut some openings for food plots and some trail systems and travel corridors, and with some proper screening, you could have it be just incredible hunting. Okay, because now you lay some predictability into it. But on the deciduous side, when it comes to oaks, maples, basswoods, ironwood trees, hickories, man, when you start hinging and cutting and getting that new early successional growth, which just produces such high amounts of palatable food, you've seen it. When you start cutting holes into a closed canopy woods and get the sunlight in there and all that seed bank that's just sitting there, and so now you've got young maples and young oaks and young basswoods. And man, I mean, that is great deer food, and it also turns into deer cover. And if I had my choice, I'd take that.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
My ideal property, you didn't ask me this question, but if I had an 80 acres and it was ideal, I'd like it to be about 40 acres of deciduous woods, oaks, maples, and that sort of thing. Maybe a 2 to 3 acre clump of pines and spruces that somebody planted with some open tillable on it, and a couple of either a wetland, a swamp, marsh, or a stream. That'd be my ideal property.
Okay. Well, and it makes sense too when you're saying, with having the deciduous forest, because with the versatility, I mean, if you don't have any bedding, you can make bedding. When you have, because in my early practices of trying to hinge cut, I went out and just tried to hinge cut a lot of different trees just to see how they'd hinge. And a couple times I went out and hinged some pine trees, and they just don't hinge, No. So you're kind of, yes, within one way, if they're really thick, yes, they are bedding. Why would you ever want a hinge cutting? But if you do have a whole property of them, then I don't know. I guess I could see the versatility of what you were saying, though.
Yeah, and I have been on some really neat properties throughout the Midwest and Michigan included, where people had large blocks of planted. Maybe it was an old Christmas tree farm or something, and those guys go in there strategically, and they create these corridors and access routes and small openings for micro food plots, and maybe 1 or 2 large destination plots. And these guys consistently kill really good deer because they literally put a travel corridor, and they've got all their, they got their secluded bedding areas in those spruce trees, but they've got great food sources. And then they can kind of divide up the bedding areas from, buck bedding to large family doe groups. And so regardless of what you have, there are things you can do. Absolutely.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, Jake, we're up here on about an hour now. And
okay. Yeah.
I appreciate you coming on doing this again. And, congratulations to you again. And that's awesome that you went in there and got your deer. And, for the rest of the year going forward, I hope you get on another one, actually.
You'll be probably the second or third person that knows. So.
Well, I appreciate that, and you're going to be the first person to know if I ever do kill something this year on the 1 acre. So we'll definitely have to do this again once Cole and I get to come down and at your house, and I'll bring all the podcast stuff down with me, and maybe we'll do an end of the year wrap up and do a walk through your farm and do another podcast as well.
It would be great. I'd love to do it. Anything to help you. So are you heading out of state again real quick here?
There is a chance that I might be going to Ohio to hunt for myself. I say for myself, I will be, I'll get to hunt, I guess, for Arrival Wild, our TV show. Chris and Casey have got some trips coming up that they have to go do for other obligations here, kind of in October lullish, if you want to say, around the 15th. So I might take that time to go and, take a cameraman with me and go to Ohio and hunt for a couple days. I got to be back here on the 20th for a wedding. I've got a wedding I got to go to up in northern Michigan. And then Casey and I will really hit the road probably right around the 28th or 29th of October. And we're going to go to Kansas first and really hit Kansas hard and try to get something down there. And then him and I will probably hit Ohio late season. Him and I had a really good muzzleloader hunt last year, late season, killed probably a 6.5-year-old deer we called Eeyore with a muzzleloader. So we like to do Ohio. He likes to do Ohio late season. So that'll probably be what it consists of. But I'm really hoping I'll be able to be around here a couple more times to probably not in the rut, but like leading up to the rut. And that's my favorite time to hunt anyway, is those 5 days leading up to October, because that's, in my opinion, and a lot of other people's opinion as well, especially here in Michigan, but anywhere, I've seen it with my own 2 eyes here in Michigan, that the biggest deer on our farm, I've seen more daylight activity from the stand, deer on the hoof, from the 25th to the 29th or 30th of October.
So 3 or 4 years ago, I saw probably the second biggest deer I've ever seen on hoof. Here, I got one picture of him. So he was just cruising through, but he was here on October 25th.
Yeah.
And so that's a great day, I will tell you.
That's my favorite time to hunt, is right then. So I'm kind of hoping I get a chance to hunt here in Michigan at that time, because like I've showed you some pictures, and I've got some big deer on the main farm this year, and I got a couple good deer on my other family farm as well. And I really kind of want to get after it for 3 or 4 days then, and hopefully we'll have a cold front come through then too. So.
Oh, I hope so. Well, I'm anxiously waiting your text message with your picture. Okay.
Well, I'm anxiously waiting to send it. So.
Oh man.
But,
Yep. It's I've never quite been in this position, killing a really good deer this early in the season. So now it's like, man, I'm just going to stay out of my areas. Wait till the 25th of October, like you. Go
there you
see what's
go.
happening, Yep.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, again, thanks again for coming on, Jake, and good
welcome,
luck the rest of the season. And I know you and I'll talk here just about every week. So,
Okay, well, you
good
take
luck,
care.
and yeah, thanks a lot, Jake.
Thanks a lot. Yep. Bye-bye, Aaron.
And there it is, another good podcast from Jake Ehlinger. And I can't thank Jake enough for coming on again and doing this podcast. And what a great story about Pretty Boy. And, that's the second year in a row he's targeted a deer in Michigan and got him on the ground, 3.5 to a 4.5-year-old deer. And he's doing that consistently, which really shows for his property and really what he's done and molded it into. With that being said, I want to thank everybody for bearing with me for the last month. I'm sorry I didn't get any podcasts out, but now we're going to be doing every Wednesday like normal throughout the fall, and everybody is just, I keep saying it, but it's unbelievable how people are, the feedback and they're giving me and the support, and it's great, and I really appreciate it. And if you guys could still go to iTunes and leave a review and leave some feedback would be great. And even on the social media channels, go follow the Fall Podcast on Instagram, on Facebook. And I really appreciate it again. So don't forget, next Wednesday we'll have an all new podcast for you. Thanks, everybody.